It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined today by Adam Hill. He is a member of the Board of Supervisors in San Luis Obispo County. And sir, the news continues to be dire. I recently received a chart of the reservoir conditions in this county. It's devastating. Nacimiento, 19% of capacity. Salinas, 29% of capacity. How are you feeling?
Dry,
well stated.
Dry, yes. It's the perfect storm of no storm. We haven't had rain in years, and literally, I mean, and we have certainly found that it's affected everything from groundwater to our reservoirs to all of our water supply.
But what's happening on a day in and day out basis? Are there palpable impacts, or is that the problem, that there aren't, so we're not doing enough?
There are, but probably not to the level where you do get that. In the rural areas, particularly up in North County, in the Paso Basin area, there's a lot of rural homeowners whose wells have gone dry, who've had to drill new wells, which can cost upwards to $35,000 or more. They've had to go deeper. In some cases, they've had water trucked in. We've seen that in other parts of the county. In Cambria, their water situation so dire that restaurants are refusing to give any water other than bottled water, which you'll pay for. So yeah, we're starting to see more and more of this. And
you mentioned the folks that need to dig deeper, drill deeper for groundwater.
Right.
On the one hand, you can sympathize with them because many of them need that to live, both personally and professionally. Many of them are in agriculture. The other problem with that, though, is the deeper they go, the riskier it is on a whole host of reasons. I'm sure you've heard of the concept of subsidence, where literally the ground starts to collapse on itself and you can never recharge that ground again.
Right.
And there's also just general overdrafting.
Yeah.
And so where do we go with that?
Well, that's the concern, certainly with probably most prominently with the Paso Basin, because it's in steep decline, and it's, I think, actually the biggest basin in the entire state of California.
Wow.
I mean, in terms of its size, and it goes into Monterey County as well. And what we've tried to explain to people who I think to some degree have been in denial for a variety of reasons is that once you wreck a basin, there's no going back. You can't just sort of repair it.
Subsidence is it's not reversible.
Exactly.
If you overdraft, arguably that can be handled because you can recharge it in some ways.
Sure.
But at this stage, do we know if there's been subsidence within the Paso Basin or otherwise?
We have not tracked that yet, so we haven't seen anything of catastrophic. There hasn't been anything that bad, but we're starting to get to the point where people are increasingly concerned, even in areas where they're not having the same kinds of water problems in our community.
Because I'm sure in counties north of here and even east of here, subsidence is happening. I mean, this is something that is really scaring a lot of folks, both in the Central Valley, even on the Central Coast. So where does this county go from here? What is happening in terms of the local reaction to our drought?
Right. Well, on the Paso Basin, it seems like the board is finally moving forward in supporting the special legislation to create a water district that's essentially been formed by the stakeholders in Paso, and it's not without controversy.
No doubt.
As anything with water is. And so we hope to be able to see something good that comes out of the state Senate. And right now we're all supportive of it, and then we go through the LAFCO process to create a water district.
Local Agency Formation Committee.
Yeah. I mean, essentially the biggest problem that everybody in California faces is that there is no groundwater management.
And I want to talk about that when we come back, because it is remarkable to many that a state like California, which is seen as a state with a high regulatory environment, is one of the few, if only, states that does not regulate groundwater. So that's what we'll talk about when we come back. For our viewers on HLN, I want to thank you so much for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back with Supervisor Adam Hill. Okay, Supervisor, let's talk about groundwater regulation. It's remarkable to many that California, which is seen as a high regulation state, does not regulate groundwater.
Yeah.
How, why, do you know?
Well, there's been a historic resistance to it. Maybe this is one of the leftovers from the Wild West view of things, or the kind of, there is a sense of independence about landowners and a state that has been in earlier iterations, ranches and farms and other things. So, that's my speculation in terms. And then, of course, as the state grew and became increasingly more populated, more sophisticated in a number of things that it also does, there was no appetite to start to impose these kinds of regulations, which makes it all that much more difficult now.
As we speak, there is a lot of discussion about how and whether to regulate groundwater. It appears that there seems to be some bipartisan consensus behind it. But the question that divides the parties is whom will have the authority to regulate.
Right.
I think there's a general view that the local should get first crack at it, but then the question becomes, if the locals don't take that authority, should the state be able to step in, or should the state be required to step in?
Right.
Where do you come down on that? What have you heard? What do you know?
Well, there's legislation now, Pavley-Dickinson bills, that I think have some aspects to it that are valuable, which answer some of the toughest questions at the state level, sort of mandating it, metering and monitoring, which can be the most difficult thing. There's just no tradition of it, and therefore a lot of people who use water in the agriculture industry and any other water-intensive industry, you will resist that. But if it's already imposed as a state regulation, then it probably makes it easier to do things at the local level. So I think that there's a sense of some of the more difficult things will be legislated at the state level, and then the way the programs will work and the way the districts or the flood controls or irrigation districts, whatever anyone comes up with locally, can be managed at the local. So I think it can be done both ways.
If a locality does not regulate, should the state step in?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm of the mind that because this is, this is one of those, it's the tragic, the classic case of the tragedy of the commons. Because this is a resource that's so critical, and because it's really difficult to say without changing the way we do things that somebody has more of a right to use as much as they want than someone else. I think that's where government does come in, because the government has to somehow be a referee here.
In terms of local control, local authority, the state recently passed a law which gave local entities the ability, the right, if they already didn't legislate it itself, to fine those that are engaging in the overuse of water, be it through using their sprinklers too often, using their sprinklers during the day, watering down their driveways. Where is San Luis Obispo, either the county or the 7 cities or the unincorporated areas, on this?
Well, we haven't actually brought it up as something that we want to impose just yet, and I'm not sure that any of the cities have. I think maybe in Cambria, which is the CSD kind of runs things, they may be moving closer to it because their situation is probably most dire. I would hope we don't have to get to that, which meaning that I hope that there's a variety of conservation measures that we can get everybody to agree to. But it may happen. I mean, unfortunately, there's a sense that nothing seriously gets done until the crisis gets to that point.
And I'm wondering, though, aren't we already there? I mean, I read the same things that you read, and I've seen folks smarter than me say this is the worst drought since 1570. This is a once-in-a-millennia drought. The El Nino is not coming. I saw one commentator suggest that because this drought is so severe, out-migrating people from California. That was done kind of naturally by civilizations in the past, but now we're going to have to affirmatively get people out.
Yeah. There's certainly a plethora of things that could happen, ranging from fines to an understanding of what's sustainable and what's not sustainable, whether it be in any industry and in any way that we even landscape our homes and businesses. I mean, I think a large change is coming. I don't think we can live the way we have lived in terms of the use of water in the past. And I think anybody that thinks that that's going to be cured by a few seasons of rain is not paying attention.
When is it coming? When does the government simply say the time is now, or is the answer never?
I don't think the answer is never. I think to some degree, if we don't see enough going on at the local level, then the governor's probably going to get involved.
His name is Adam Hill, member of the Board of Supervisors in San Luis Obispo. I'm Brad Pomerance's California Edition.